I wish I would have been asking myself this question before it became too late. Let me tell you some things about myself before that question became so important. My name is Tasha. I was very active in my community, in recreation, and in my job. As a teenager, I was very fond of track and volleyball. I was actually a pretty fast runner. Blonde hair, blue-eyed girl that excelled at sports. I kept that desire and ability alive into my adulthood. My father left my mother when I was only a little girl, so my mother raised me to be a strong, independent young woman. That's what fueled my desire to be the best at whatever I set my mind to. I ranked top 3 of the track runners at the divisional races in high school. I developed a sharp prowess and always looked for my opponent's weak spots and sort of exploited them to win. I always considered myself a bit of a survivalist and outdoors woman. My mom and I would go camping 2 times a year, and I would go backwoods backpacking 3 to 4 times a year with my friends. As you can imagine, I was a very healthy and active person. I graduated from law school 3 years ago and have been working in a small firm located in the middle of Kent, Washington. I had been very happy here since moving away from St. Cloud, Minnesota. My mom had passed away the year before I moved away. I had a fiancé, Jake, who worked as a DJ at a regional radio station. I was raised with a fairly strict moral code, so my fiancé and I decided to be old-fashioned, and we didn't live together or anything. We were just enjoying building our foundation for life together. He was promoted to station manager on March 20th, 2020. Life was pretty good up to that point. Then things started to change. COVID became more than just a rumor or China virus. It started becoming an issue much closer to home here in Washington. I hadn't paid much attention to the news. I went to the office on the 20th after I got the call that my fiancé received an email with the details of his promotion. My office manager said that we had to be all prepared to get our work laptops and files together and get ourselves set up to possibly start working from home. The governor was set to put a shelter-at-home order in place. I guess I never gave the virus much credit or thought up to this point. Well, now it was becoming much more real. So that afternoon I gathered my things and headed home. Jake called me and asked if I had heard what was potentially going on. We discussed what it could all mean and some possible outcomes. Jake thought it was all fake, and he didn't think it was serious. On the other hand, I was skeptical, but open-minded. On the 23rd, the governor declared the shelter-in-place order, and we were officially homebound. I just ordered in takeout and ordered grocery pickup online like I always have done. So life wasn't much different. I decided to go to a local trail and do my evening run. I couldn't help but think about that stupid virus. But I shrugged it off and ran my 7 miles. I did that the whole week of the 23rd. The following week, dire numbers were being thrown around, and it appeared the virus spread was trying to intensify. Jake still thought it was stupid and kept going about his daily life. Though he had to set up at home, he still went out and about like normal. Fast forward a few days and people everywhere in the area are panic buying everything. Sick people and healthy people alike were filling the stores to get their daily needs. There were hundreds who were now sick, and many of those thought it wasn't a big deal. There were many who were asymptomatic carriers and had no symptoms. The government health officials said that wearing masks didn't help healthy people, but I knew logically that it would help. I begged Jake to take it serious. I am very serious about my health, so I wanted him to be as well. He brushed it off and felt that he wouldn't get sick because it was statistically impossible. On March 27th, he put on his favorite blue ball cap and went to the grocery store with no mask or even hand sanitizer. He was so stubborn. He was standing in the bread aisle looking for his favorite brand, and someone walked up behind him very close and started looking as well. Jake already had heard about the order to be 6 feet apart, but he didn't pay attention to the man behind him. The man got closer and closer to see the labels. He then coughed. Jake told him that he was rude. Jake grabbed the bread he wanted and finished shopping. He told me all about this and I was freaked out, to say the least. What if he had COVID-19 and just infected my fiancé? Would Jake be among those that barely get sick and recover and move on? I told Jake he had to keep me updated every day on how he was feeling. On April 1st, he called and said he felt like he couldn't breathe well and was running a low-grade fever. I told him it was not a funny April Fool's joke. He told me he wasn't joking. I told him to go to a clinic and get checked out and tested. He said it wasn't a big deal because he has allergies, and sure, that's what it was. I knew he had asthma and had an inhaler, so I thought if he had trouble breathing, he would use that. The next morning, he called me that he was headed to the hospital because he had so much trouble breathing and was running 104 fever. I started to panic. I knew I couldn't go there and be with him, so I just stayed on the phone as long as possible. Eventually, he had to go so he could be seen by the doctor. Little did I know that would be the last time I talked to Jake. He was admitted into the hospital that evening and was being treated for pneumonia. The next morning, I received a phone call that he passed away from asphyxiation in his sleep. COVID had quickly ravaged his already lightly scarred lungs from asthma, and his body couldn't handle it. April 3rd, my fiancé was dead. My life changed forever. I became consumed in my grief. I was emotionally numb. I was so angry at him for not taking it serious, and at the man who was careless and didn't wear a mask. I was distraught knowing that I was alone. I digressed rather quickly. I decided to clear my head and go for a run. Of course, I wore a mask. I went to the same trail I've been running for years now. I ran my 7 miles rather quickly. I never even saw anyone on the trail. I got back to my car and was in process of doing some cool-off stretches. As I'm stretched out with my face down, a man walked up behind me. I was zoned out, focusing on stretching my stresses away. I had no clue that he was just a foot away from behind me. He tapped me on my back. Needless to say, I flew up from pose with the speed of an Olympian. I had taken my mask off at this point, and he was only about 2 feet from me. I yelled at him to get away from me. He wasn't 6 feet away. He put his hands up and quickly stepped back and apologized for scaring me. He had his fancy striped mask on and a blue ball cap, but I was having none of it. I proceeded to take the next 2 minutes to tell him what I thought of him and his ignorance the most colorful way I knew how. The poor man just stood there as I unloaded on him. He apologized again. I finally gave him a chance to speak, and all he asked was if this trail was the 3.5 mile or the 5 mile. He was new and didn't know which one he was at. I felt horrible and justified all at the same time. I told him it was the 3.5 mile as I got in my car and locked the doors. He got into his big red Alphabet Series diesel truck and drove away. It was so similar to the one my fiancé drove. I just sat there and started to cry. The way I reacted wasn't me. I'm a strong person and I couldn't control myself. That event scared me to death, so I decided to stop running for the time being. I went home and stayed home. A couple of weeks went by and I haven't even left the house. My phone became my only comfort. It was my lifeline to the outside world. I had purchased a Circle brand security system with cameras and installed it myself. I wanted to see what was happening around me as I had joined some prep groups on social media and started to think they had valid points. Other than the few video meetings for work, it was social media that was my social life. My best friend was my fiancé, so I had no one I could just chat with. I became absorbed in my virtual world because it wasn't painful like the real one. I needed some groceries because I was running low on necessities. I decided to muster up some strength and go out to the store. I knew about all the social distancing measures that were put in place, so that made me feel a little better. By now, there were thousands sick and hundreds dead from COVID-19. I got my mask and a go bottle of sanitizer and went to the big members-only club store. I decided I only wanted to go out once a month, so I was going to buy bulk and get it over with. I got there in the morning and stood in line. I immediately had waves of anxiety sweep over me standing there. I felt so vulnerable. So I buried my face in my virtual world so I could feel some comfort. I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings, but there was someone who apparently was. A man walked up behind me wearing a mask. Now, everyone in line, including myself, had donned masks, so it was nothing unusual. I just kept my head down and facing my phone. I didn't even notice that he was not 6 feet away from me. He was well within an arm reach. I felt my purse move just slightly. I assumed it was the breeze, so I didn't think anything of it. A few minutes passed, and I was led inside to start shopping. Between grabbing items, I had my social account on my screen scrolling through every post I could find. I was in my own little world. You know that feeling of someone watching you? That slight uneasiness that there is a pair of eyes that has glanced your way one too many times? Well, I brushed it off as paranoia. I checked out with my items and walked back to my car. I never even looked around me. I became so distant and so detached from being quarantined at home and the grief I was working through. I was a zombie of sorts. I drove back to my home and unloaded my groceries. I locked myself in and started my day. Later that evening, I had prepared dinner and streamed a movie. I noticed my Circle camera app notified me of movement in the front doorbell. I looked and couldn't see anything except my car, the neighbor's car, a big red truck, and a cat walking through the front yard. That darn cat wouldn't stop snooping around all the surrounding homes. It's a stray, but lives in the alley behind my house. So I put my phone down and go get myself some ice cream and stream another movie. I ended up falling asleep on the couch. I woke up early the next morning with a migraine. Since it was the weekend, I took some meds and took a nap after eating. After a couple of hours, I woke up and, like my normal routine, I checked my social media. As I was scrolling through, I got a notice from my front doorbell camera. I ignored it and kept scrolling. Suddenly, I hear a bang at the front door. I freeze in fear. I slowly lower the app I'm on and open the camera app. I look through the live feed of the camera and see the brown parcel delivery truck drive away. I feel a wave of relief come over me. In my half-asleep, half-scared stupor, unlock the door and grab my package. I get back to the kitchen counter so I can open it. I bought myself a new tablet so I could play my games easier and surf social media. I got engrossed in my new toy for hours. By this time, I noticed myself becoming the proverbial couch potato, but I didn't care because I was feeling lost. I finally got my face out of the tablet and made myself some dinner. I streamed another movie, as was my now usual evening routine. I fell asleep during the movie. I was sleeping fairly deep, but was suddenly woken up by a squeak. I raised myself off the couch and rubbed my eyes to get my bearings. I look around, briefly a little confused, but see nothing. I walk over to the kitchen to get some water and noticed my front door is unlocked. I went over and locked it quickly. I must have forgotten to lock it when I got my package a few hours earlier. I decided to go take a nice hot shower to ease my mind and help me get through this mind-numbing quarantine. I get out and go to bed. The last thing I remember is being violently grabbed and a fuming cloth shoved in my face. I woke up in the back of a truck driving down the road. My hands were tied and my neck and face hurt really bad. I realized I was bleeding. I was laid lengthwise in the back floorboard, so I couldn't move much. We stopped off somewhere poorly lit. I assumed it was for fuel, as the engine was loud like my fiancé's truck was, and it looked like we were under an overhang from what I could make out of the window. The man got out of the truck and I noticed he was wearing a blue ball cap. I was trying to remember as many details as I could. All of a sudden the door opened above my head, and I noticed the door jamb was red. I heard a deep voice that sounded vaguely familiar. He told me to open my mouth so he could give me water. I looked up and I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I flashed back to that day several weeks ago when I berated a man with a blue ball cap wearing a fancy mask. This man was wearing the same fancy mask. He got into a big red diesel truck. It all hit me like a ton of bricks. How could I have been so careless? How could I have been so stupid not to see it? It was the same man that stood behind me in line at the wholesale club store. I remembered my purse moving. He must have dropped a tracking or listening device in my purse. It hit me that it was the same big red truck I saw in my camera footage. How could this be happening to someone like me? I was always so observant, so strong, so sharp. I realized I let myself go mentally and emotionally. This virus consumed my entire life and took what was most important to me. I let my guard down. This virus was also the perfect cover for him to plan and commit this crime because everyone is wearing masks. At this point, I knew I needed to play it cool as I was realizing what was happening. I opened my mouth and he poured some water in. He shut the door of the truck and got in and started down the road. After about 20 minutes of driving, I hear a siren all of a sudden and blue lights coming through the back window. The man in the blue ball cap blurted out numerous expletives. He leaned around and told me if I moved or made a sound, he would kill me. I was so scared, but I wasn't going to be a victim any longer. The officer came to his window and told him he was speeding and needed his license and registration. I purposely kept quiet so that the officer could get the man's info and description. The officer came back and told the man to lower his mask so he could verify the face on the license. I counted to 3 and screamed as loud as I could to help me. I heard the man yell, "Shut up," and start the truck to speed off. The officer yelled to stop and for him to put his hands up. I knew the officer already drew his gun for him to say that. He put the truck in drive and hit the pedal. I felt the truck start to push forward and then suddenly 2 gunshots. The truck jerked to one side and went into the ditch. The officer yelled again for him to get out of the truck. I thought the officer shot the man, but he only shot out his front tire. The officer opened the door and tore the man out. By this time, another cruiser pulled up, and a female officer opened the back door to rescue me. I was sobbing like a baby, and she released my hands and got me out of the truck, and she hugged me so tight and assured me I was now safe. I was taken to the hospital to be treated for my injuries. I found out later on that the police found the evidence that he was listening to my routine from the device he dropped in my purse, and numerous photos of me, some through my windows at home. Needless to say, I moved to another part of town and changed my routine. I think about the events that led up to the worst experience of my life. Why didn't my fiancé take COVID-19 seriously? He could still be alive. If he would have noticed the man behind him, he could have put some distance between them. If I had have been paying attention when I was stretching, maybe I wouldn't have reacted so badly to that man, and maybe he wouldn't have been incited to retaliate. If I would not have been so absorbed in my virtual world, maybe I could have paid attention that he was behind me at the wholesale club store. Maybe then I could pull my purse in front of me and divert it away from him. If I would have been paying attention that he followed me home and sat in my house a couple of days later, I could have called the police and ended this. If I wasn't so numbingly focused on social media, maybe I could have noticed I left the front door unlocked, and he wouldn't have had the chance to sneak in while I was sleeping. Now I don't take my surroundings and safety for granted. I got myself back to the way my mother raised me. Now, everywhere I go, I ask myself one question: who is behind you right now? Thank you everyone for listening and watching. My name is Matt. I hope you enjoyed my story. Your generosity and support is much appreciated, so please hit that subscribe button and like my video and share to your social media. I'll catch everyone in the next video.